So welcome with domestic violence segment. We're going to discuss more than one segment tonight. CBCS 504 or 3C Chaplaincy Training. Welcome everybody. Let us pray and open this meeting. Heavenly Father, Almighty God, we glorify you today and we thank you for your loving embrace and that we can always rely upon Jesus. Jesus, the name above all the other names. We glorify you and we ask you today that you will bless our hearts, that you will bless this ministry of chaplaincy in our hearts, in the name of Jesus. That you will encourage us and strengthen us, Lord, to find our way outside the gates of the church, in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, as you would know, chaplain, pastor, that we have been called upon a time and again to accompany a police officer or sheriff to the scene of the domestic violence incident. The chaplain must learn very quickly that they are no longer in a pastoral role, especially at these incidents. Remember what we did in the previous time, and that is that if you are accompanying the police officer to a domestic violence situation, you shouldn't stand right behind the officer when he knocks on the door. You would maybe stand about 5 meters away, just to, and not straight behind him, because he may have to fall back, completely back, bringing up his firearm, and you want to be out of the line of fire. Actually, when the cop moves this side or that side, you want to be out of the line of fire. When the perp opens the door, he wants to make a shot at the cop, and the cop ducks, and you're in the way. So you would rather stand, completely backwards, and then maybe 2 steps either to the right side or the left side, depending on the swing of the door, coming to the inside. So if the doors is coming like this, you'll probably want to stand over there. So it will be more difficult for the perp to see you, because you do not want to be seen immediately when the door opens at the domestic violence situation, because it's really dangerous and frightening. Now, this little video segment, it's a long video. I'm not going to show it to you because it will just take too much time. But I just want to let you get the feeling of what happens at the domestic violent call to 911, police, or whatever the case may be. You'll see that it's quite scary to think that people are going through these nonsense. Listen to this.
And I'm afraid for my son and my babies. Please hurry, please.
Victims of domestic violence, they're like a prisoner of war.
Officers have to understand that either you're our knight in shining armor or you're our worst nightmares.
The police are on their way, okay?
The question is, when do we change the culture and all stand up and say that violence against women is something we're not going to tolerate in policing?
You won't die. You won't die. For what? What's wrong with your wife?
I tried to strangle her about 4 different ways.
You won't die. Why are you trying to kill her?
Because I don't like her.
This is truly the engine and the juice that runs this crime day in and day out, is someone's belief that they have every bit of control over a family and their everyday movement and their life.
When I met my husband, he was so charming. As soon as I married him, his whole disposition changed with me. Immediately, I became owned.
I mean, manipulation is obviously a tactic that they use, but when you're in it, it's so hard to see. And this is the pattern of an abuser. They twist your life.
In 90% plus of cases involving serious, severe domestic violence, you're going to see a female victim.
Women are the #1 target, and most perpetrators are male. However, there is a significant population of LGBTQ intimate partner violence.
A series of behaviors typically emerge. One is the complete domination over money, forced sex, extreme jealousy and obsession. If I can't have you, nobody's going to have you. Threats to kill.
What's key here is to remember that this is a relationship that evolves over time. This is not just the incident that you are in as a police officer.
I want to talk about frustrations.
All right, so you can hear that there's a lot of frustration going on, and you even heard that our presenter, he just started his speech. I want to talk about frustration. Now, what happens is, in most such cases, that the abuser would probably use the tactic what we call brainwashing or forced conversions. Of course, in this way, in this manner, the brainwasher or the controller gets to control his prey or his victim, who may very well be his wife, his child, his intimate partner. We've seen that through the years that intimate partner violence has increased drastically. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And the reason for that is because of the homosexual community. They're starting to get involved, and over the world these days they are getting married, and you know, it's just the dynamics is so frustrating to both of these parties. I haven't seen in my whole life, maybe here or there, I would have seen a happy homosexual couple. Most of them, they've got infighting, they are unhappy. And, you know, as Bible believers, why all of this is happening, of course, is that because it's an abomination before God. But nonetheless, 1 out of every 4 women are being domestically violated in their homes right now at this point. Now, the pro-arrest policies, you know, this is the topics we may make of discussion. And truly speaking, oops, there we go. Let me just go back. There's many topics to consider when we consider the chaplain and what the chaplain should understand, and these things probably would be the pro-arrest policies. What happens, and what kind of advice can you give if you're a first responder with a cop? The victim may want to speak to you about pro-arrest policies, order of protection, as we know that, ex partes and so on, shelters. Do you know any shelters in your city? You know, the Pretoria area had good shelters, but in Rustenburg we had no shelters. So what I had to do is many times I would transfer or ask for a person to, you know, and get them some transportation to Pretoria, where the Salvation Army had a fantastic little facility over there in Pretoria Gardens for a shelter for women and abused ladies and children. And then also, what about crisis centers, the victim witness protection program? And what is a chaplain's role in all of this? And what should you do as a chaplain when you get to a scene? Because, I mean, you do not want to be in the way of the cop to do his job. For example, you come to a house, and in a small town like Mani and myself, and we are living in small towns now. Caledon, I mean, how many people lives in Caledon? Probably 10,000 people, if it's so much, you know.
I think it's less.
Yeah,
It's about 3,000 households.
You see, 3,000 households. We've got 4,500 people staying in Laurelsville. So the chances, if I would have gone right along with the police department, the sheriff's department here in town, and there's a domestic violence situation, I may probably know these people, you know. So what is your role when you know these people? Should you get involved, like telling the cop, listen, man, I really feel bad. I think we do not have to arrest the person who's in my church or whatever the case may be. It can cause harm to your ministry. And also how the chaplain can help the officer at the domestic violence call. What would you do at the domestic violence call? We'll see that during this course, that maybe I can give you some tips, you know, how you should conduct yourself, because the officer is there for your protection also. I mean, and you should have the back of the officer. And when you see a perp, his hands, or the violators, his hands is not visible, you should be very careful, because you need to always see the hands of the perp, because he may or may not have a firearm, you know, on his side, or all of that. What is some techniques in domestic violence? Because remember, in our TIA CSC, we also discussed the four, or the violence cycle. You remember the violence cycle back in the day when we had that discussions? We always have the status quo, and then we move to tension building. We have the outburst, and then of course the honeymoon stage again. And that circle just go on and go on forever, because as soon as the perpetrator violates the victim, then he comes to a point and say, I'm so sorry, please help me, I'm so lost without you, forgive me, I love you, I will do my best to support you and the kids, I will never do it again. Then the couple is again on honeymoon, and then soon enough they will reach the status quo again, and then of course tension will build, and so on and so forth. And these are all to do with the kind of techniques you would need to understand as being a chaplain, as a pastor, to go to these kind of situations, because many times you'll have to wear two caps, two hats, and that's the hat of the chaplain and the hat, of course, of the pastor. Then also follow up by the chaplain. Sometimes the cop would love for you to follow up with a family, especially when there's children involved, and you never know what the perpetrator would kind of, get a hold of. You'll have to do some follow-up in that regards, and also the resources and the allies you want to have and want to make during that course. So there's some do's in a domestic violence call, and some of them: stand to the rear and side of the soft officer when knocking on the door. Remember, I told you, if the officer is right here and you're right there, stand to the rear and the side of the officer, because the officer may retaliate, going backwards, and you'll be in the way if you're too close. But if he retaliates and get out of the way of the gun, because the perp may have a gun, gets out of the way of a gun with the gun, and you'll be straight in the way. So call for backup, if you will, even if the situation seems to be diffusing. Most of the times in domestic violence situations, the cops would respond and tell, listen, I need another pair of eyes at a scene. Now, when the chaplain is with the cop, they probably would enter the house, but the cop may or may not choose to enter the house alone, because it's an unhealthy thing. So most of the times, if the cop travels alone on that day, he probably will wait for some backup. But if you're with the cop, you will be his backup. Call for backup, even if you think it's not necessary. So what will happen is, over the radio, when the cop reports over the radio and tells the charge office or the radio operator, listen, now I've been, we're at this house, me and the chaplain, we're going to get out now. And you go to the front door and you stand a little bit backwards, and the cops in the area will already kind of approach, make their way to the direction of that house, to be close, if something would happen, that you can give a shout out for their assistance. Observe the room and people for weapons. When you enter the room from other side, whenever you enter the room, see who's the people in the house. And especially when there's a weapon lying on the table, make sure that you let the cop know there's a weapon right there, because the cop would probably take that. Then remain alert for other people in the house or the apartment, because if the cop enters the house and they're screaming and yelling, maybe the children is in the house, or maybe another person who's also a violator, a crazy man or a woman that's upstairs with a cricket bat, and they will come down to try and help and stop the cop and the chaplain for doing the job. Then there's some others. Make conversation with the person to which the officer is not speaking. So do not let say, for example, the officer has got, he's got the person in his eyes. The perpetrator is speaking to the perp. Probably will first speak to the victim, because he wants the victim to de-escalate, and he wants her to press charges. I mean, you're not there for nothing. So what is amazing about this, you'll have to kind of face one another. So you are right here and the cop is right there, but not too close to one another, because you probably would speak to the perpetrator, and the perpetrator will have his back on his wife, who is speaking to the cop over here. So you have to stand in such a manner that you can see the cop, because you'll have to make eye contact with the cop to see, and monitor what is the explanation, because the cop may or may not ask you, bring the perp right here real quick, let me speak to this person, because you do not want the couple to face one another. you know, so you're there for the backup of the officer. So you'll do your best to do, you know, backup. But then also keep subjects from making eye contact, obviously, then remain calm. You have to remain calm. Doesn't matter if there's blood or there's the paramedics is on the scene already. You'll have to just remain calm and try to let the other people also remain calm in the room, especially for the kids' sake. I mean, most of the couples who have, you know, who's domestic violent, many of them, they've got kids in the house. So make sure everybody's calm for the sake of the kids and try the kids to get to bed again. Always remember who is in charge. It's not the chaplain, it's not the pastor. Even if you're the pastor of this police officer, you're not in charge of the scene. The officer is officially in charge of the scene. You're just there for his or her safety. So yes, we have to stop that. Then enter the house or apartment ahead of the officer. Do not. I mean, we don't want to enter the house ahead of the cop. I mean, if you knock on the door, the cop is behind you, you're in the line of fire, because the cop would want to launch his gun, but if you're in the way, he cannot, because it's not a safe direction. He's been trained to always point his gun in a safe direction, and a safe direction is either a wall or a perp with a gun. I mean, that is the safe direction. Allow the subjects to maintain eye contact. Not at all, because you don't want that. You do not want them. And also don't allow a person to leave the room without an officer or a chaplain present, because many times they would say, would you excuse me? I want to go to the bathroom. And whilst they're going to the bathroom, they may pass the room where the gun is, or they may pick up a weapon. So it's better that somebody follows them to the bathroom. Remain silent if you see a weapon. Don't remain silent, in other words. So this is one of the don'ts over here. This is very dangerous to think that you'll just remain quiet, because, I mean, if you remain quiet, that causes a problem. Even if nobody touches the weapon, you just see the weapon over there in the corner, you'll just say to the officer, I see a weapon over there. And you can also maybe ask the officer to make his way there so that he can be closer to the weapon than yourself. Don't allow children or others to distract the officer. Try to get them away if there's family members involved, because if mother-in-law's there, it's going to be a problem, man. Oh man, oh man. So yeah, just try and get those people who's distracting the officer with his investigation. You know, try them to calm them down and all of that. Because if somebody is bleeding, somebody's going to jail. But he needs the lady to press charges. And many times these people are brainwashed. They do not want to press charges. It creates a problem for the judicial situation. Then never get between the officer and the subjects. In other words, if they are fighting right now, don't get between them. But open your eyes, let your hands work. Try and help him to get, if they are fighting and the officer is there, and they're fighting over the officer, it can also create a problem. You should try to get them out of one another's hairs. The other time we had a police officer teaching us a class in chaplaincy some years back, and he told us a story when he went to a domestic violence situation. He came to this house. He was unfortunately alone. He entered the house. When he entered the house, the woman and the husband was fighting, and he got the husband off the woman because he was beating her. And then he kind of got a hold of this man. It was a huge, gigantic person, but he managed to push him down on his face on the mat and the carpet, I mean. And then he tried to bring this person under arrest, but he really struggled with that, and he's focused all of this on this perpetrator. The woman, on the other hand, she had a knife, and she just sticked it into the side of the officer, between his rib cage, the knife. So he just looked at it, and he saw, that's painful. He gave her just a fist to get her away from him, and he stood up, and he left him, and he went to the ER. While on his way to the ER, he contacted his patrol officers. He said, that lady just stuck me with a knife. You better get her in cuffs, as well as the perpetrator, the domestic violent person. So yes, these things happen, and when you are there, you have to watch for these things, because sometimes you get the perpetrator away from the the aggressor away from his victim. But then the victim would come and she will try to get you off her husband. It can be the other way around also. I think never take sides with other subjects because they remain the target of the investigation. So if you take sides, even if it's your congregation members, do not take sides, because at this point they're under, they're breaking the law. Domestic violence is against the law of the land. So you'll have to be very careful getting involved in taking sides with the husband or with the wife. I've seen in many counseling sessions that if you would counsel a woman and she's maybe a member in your church, and you tell her, this wife of say Brother Tom, and you tell this woman, Margie, yeah, I know you're living with a very difficult person. Brother Tom hasn't been the easiest person. He's really a bad person. Then she would get home and she'd tell her husband, Pastor said you are very bad. Yeah, he said also you are very bad. And I believe Pastor. So yes, watch out. Discussing now, don't take sides. Don't allow either subjects to believe you have authority over the officer. Don't let them think so. Even if you're gray like me and the officer is a young boy, or you're bald like Mani, don't let the people think that you are the senior on the scene. Even though you may have 40 years experience in this world, even when I was still in uniform and I would accompany a cop to a domestic violence situation, and my rank is the highest, of course, when I was a colonel, I would never push rank on a domestic violence situation because the officer needs to do his job. As soon as the people think that you're the high ranking officer, they will think, yeah, they want to speak to that man. And don't allow that, because you can only speak to the people the officer wants you to speak to. Okay. So then we've got some role-playing scenarios, and we don't usually do this online. We struggle with that, with role-playing, but I normally have a little video to play, but tonight I'm not going to play it to you. So there's also misdemeanor stops. Now, misdemeanor stops is like a little traffic stop, a broken taillight, or whatever the case may be. The chaplain's actions and responsibilities during a misdemeanor stop are to be sharply focused on being an extra set of eyes and ears for the officer with whom the chaplain is riding. So when it takes you on a ride, or if you are going with our cop on a maybe patrol car, and you just want to do a ride along with the cop, and that's allowed also in South Africa. You just have to give your permission that you're not going to sue the government because of something that happens to you, or whatever the case may be. But you may, if you want to, arrange for a ride along with the cop agency. If you do that, you're the set of eyes behind the officer's head, and nobody's got eyes behind their heads, but the cop with the chaplain, they've got eyes behind their heads. So where to position yourself, and why would you position yourself in that specific way? Now, remember now, so if this is a cop car, and I wish I had that slide inside of here, if this is a cop car, and this is the perpetrator's car over here, you would drive on that side. Let me just think. My brain is now working on the other side, but doesn't matter. But the cop car would, the cop car would stand like this, and the perp's car like this, or the other way around, of course, because you're driving on the other side, because he wants to protect himself while walking to the car. Now, when the chaplain exits the patrol car, he or she is advised to walk cautiously to the right rear corner of the car, and that's where you position yourself, at the right rear corner of that patrol car. So whether they or not, the chaplain will have a relatively good view of the interior of the car. So when you go to, say, for example, this is the rear side of the misdemeanor car. It's not a felon car. It's misdemeanor, just a light traffic stop. What I will normally do is you'll just press the bonnet or the boot of the vehicle, to press hard on it to be sure it's closed. Because sometimes there will be, people in there waiting for a opportunity like this to kill a cop, or whatever the case may be. So just press lightly on that. And then on the right side, and in your case, you're driving on the other side, you'll be standing on the left corner side of this perpetrator's car, and you'll have a clear view inside of the vehicle to watch again the hands of people. Very important. You can also shine a flashlight in there if you will, if it's dark. We always train our people, you know, if they be stopped by a cop, always put on your cabin light inside of the vehicle and put your both hands on the steering wheel when you are stopped by a cop. Immediately when the cop sees this, you've put your hands on the steering wheel, and the passengers over there, you know, they will put their hands on the what do you call it, the dashboard, and the people sitting at the back would put their hands right on the seats in front of them. When the cop comes to the vehicle, you know, these people understand that I want to see their hands, because it's important to see hands. Remember, when you don't see something, it means that person is hiding something with his hands, or he wants to take out something with his hands. So whether it's day or night, you will always stand right over there, and this is a good vantage point. The chaplain can see those inside of the car are making furtive moves or attempting to hide or discard any items. By the way, sometimes a misdemeanor stop can become a felony stop, because whilst you're doing this misdemeanor stop, it may or may not be that this car was just involved in maybe a robbery or something like that. They stop and you just think you're stopping them for a little broken taillight or something like that. But in the meantime, these people are felons. So yes, watch out for that. So where not to position yourself. The chaplain should never position themselves behind the officer in a misdemeanor stop, because if this is the car, let me do this, and the officer approaches the car from this side, but I'm going to use this side now. If the officer approaches the car to the window side, the driver's side, and then the driver opens the window and you're right behind the officer, once again, like with a domestic violence case, the problem is that if you're behind the officer, he cannot fall back. You'll always have to leave space. That's why you put yourself at the back side of the car, and you're in South Africa on the right corner of the vehicle to monitor the passengers inside of the vehicle. Now, the officer is not able to see where the chaplain is and what they are doing. It's important that the officer can see you and have face contact with you. That's why you stand on the opposite side, that the officer is approaching the car to see who the driver, and to ask the driver for his license or whatever papers he needs. Now, if the officer has to make a quick retreat, the possibility of stumbling over the officer or the chaplain is extremely high when you stand straight behind the officer. It's a very bad place to stand at. All right. So looking in the car, to look at the vehicle, or somebody may get hurt. So if you are standing right there, I mean, you've got the opportunity to just look in the car. You may not touch, but you can look. To be sure that you can see the people's hands. The responsibility of the chaplain is to look out for the well-being of the officer and ensure the safety of their own life also. Because, say for example, the officer is shot, then of course you're a witness to that. And if you do not carry a firearm, you're in real big trouble. I mean, you'll be in real big trouble if you do not carry a firearm and the officer's shot there, because they would want to kill you also, because you are witness to the crime. But in any case, now the rule of add one only means always assume at least one more person is in the violator's vehicle than what you are able to see. In other words, when you approach, once again, when the officer approaches the door of the driver and you're standing on the left-hand corner of the vehicle, then if you count 4 people in the vehicle, the rule of add one applies always. Never think less than the 4 people. Always add 1 and think there's 5 people in the vehicle, because there may be somebody hiding, you know, inside of the vehicle, whatever the case may be. Now, what to do on routine stops and so on, because sometimes you'll have to also do some routine stops, like regular traffic stops, standing at the traffic light or the robot, and you ask some people to the cop asks some people to pull over. There is absolutely no such thing as a routine stop, though, but the officer you're riding with is always in charge. He will always be in charge, no matter who he is, no matter what is his rank, he's always in charge. The chaplain must be continually supportive of the officer in the presence of the public. In other words, when the public's eyes is on you, I mean, the chaplain may even be called uncle by the officer, because normally the officers would be younger than the chaplain, especially when you're a little bit older, and they will call you uncle. But on a scene, you know, all of that changes. All of a sudden, he is the most senior person. He is in control of everything. And when I say he, I also mean she. All right. I hope you would forgive me for that. So also talking with the subject of the stop, because many people they'll need to be, talking with the subjects, and if you want, probably if the officer gives you opportunity to do so. Now the violator, unless told otherwise, often assumes the older person, like what I told you, is more experienced and therefore may be in charge of the situation, which is not always the case. Now, the chaplain's duty is to direct the conversation to the patrol officer. So if two people comes and approach you and say they want to talk to you, just direct them back to the officer. The officer would appreciate that, but also expects of you to let him do his job and to fulfill his job. And they would try to speak to you again if they're not satisfied with the officer's answer, and they will, of course, you will direct them back. Unless directed otherwise by the patrol officer, the chaplain may talk and visit with occupants of the vehicle. So this often has its benefits for the patrol officer when you keep the other people busy, whilst the people or the driver of the vehicle is being charged for whatever violation he did. Now, felony stop is a complete different story. Felony stop only means the felony stop is a police action which takes place when occupants of a car are known to be armed or are known by officers to have outstanding arrest warrants. So you would be following this vehicle. Or you may even be getting a call over the radio. There's a car, a bluish car, sedan, it's a Ford, and the first three numbers of the registration plate says this. And all of a sudden, here appears the car in front of you. Now, what will happen is the officer immediately will prepare himself to pull this person over. So, and of course, when it's a felony stop, you'll have to add one, but also expect that these people may carry, when I say carry, they may carry a firearm. Now, in general, this is the protocol. At least 2 patrol cars are used where possible in making a felony stop. So what will happen is 2 vehicles will respond to this felony vehicle. So, a person that is close by or whatever the case may be. So the officer, we call it the free turn following instructions. So what will happen is if the car makes 3 turns, and also, by the way, if a cop car is following you and he's what normally will happen is if they follow you, they normally check your registration over the radio. So it will take about 3 turns. Turn right at the first right, you can turn right again, and turn right again. Then normally the cop would see you know he's following you. So if you're not a felon, he probably will stop following you. And normally at that time they would have the answer from the radio control room that you're not a perp or you're not a felon that needs to be stopped, or whatever the case may be. But in this case, most of the times 2 officers will respond or more to a felony stop. As officers do not approach the vehicle, but rather utilize the public address system to order the felons from the car. Now, this is the correct way to do that. I know that there in South Africa, many cops do not utilize the PA system on the vehicle. All of the vehicles need to have PA systems. That's the law. So what will happen is a cop car follows a felon car. He pulls it over. The car stops. No chase, nothing like that. The car stops. The officer doesn't jump out of his car and run to the door of the felon. He'll just remain in his car, calm, and tell the radio control room, listen, I've stopped this car. This is the address where I'm at. And immediately they will send some backup. And then he will just address the person, to take their hands out of the vehicle and put it on the side of the car with the windows down, of course. Put it on the side of their car. But remember, everybody may not or put their hands there. Maybe, remember, if you see 4, you count 5. Now, officers will generally use their car and doors as cover in the event of weapons being used on the other end. Now, what we see here is that felon stop, because this is not a normal misdemeanor stop. You can see that the cop's got his guns. They've got their guns on the perp over there, because there was a report on the radio, probably, that says this guy just robbed a shop on this corner and that corner. So the officers will eventually advance forward as soon as backup maybe sometimes arrive. or not, the cop will advance forward. This could be a few minutes or a few hours that these things can take place. But I mean, after the robbery took place, of course. Then things to remember, the chaplain should not be anywhere in front of or the rear bumper of the patrol car in which he or she is riding. So in a felony stop, this is a felony stop, not a misdemeanor stop where the light is broken or something like that. When a person is being stopped by a cop and he pulls his gun, because that's what normally will happen. It's a felony, he will pull his gun and he will kind of move forward. Now, you do not stand anywhere in front of the rear bumper of the patrol car. Okay, so you'll just get out of your vehicle. Do not stay put in the vehicle, because if the cop gets hurt and he gets shot, they're going to come for you. And if you're stuck in the vehicle, you're gonna have a getaway or something like that. But in any case, long story short, you'll just go and stand at the back of the patrol car. If there's a shooting, that you're out of the way, out of harm's way. So under no circumstances should the chaplain approach the felony vehicle until permission is given by the first response officer. So it only means that you'll stay back there, and you'll also probably instruct you to stay back there until it's secure. And he have searched the vehicle, he has searched the people, that there's no guns. Then of course he will call you closer when it's safe to do so. Okay, where am I now? Okay, oh, we're taking a break? Not now. So unfortunately, now this do not really apply to the South Africans. This is only a segment we normally present to the United States pastors and chaplains, but we've got what we call in South Africa the Bill of Rights. That's the second act in, well, you'll have to go to the Bill of Rights to find more or less the same kind of information. Now the Fourth Amendment, and ours is the Bill of Rights, is more or less the same from the US to the South Africa. Now the South African Bill of Rights is just so huge. I mean, we do not have to have time to elaborate on that, but I advise you, go and draw the white paper on Google and just say there, South African Bill of Rights. You'll see it's a lot of reading right there. I mean, don't kill. Don't drive on the wrong side of the road, kind of thing. Respect your neighbor. These are all biblical things also to find in the Bible. Now, the Fourth Amendment in the United States Constitution addresses the citizen rights regarding unlawful search and seizure, and also so do the Bill of Rights in South Africa. Now, the community services chaplain, especially the law enforcement chaplain, must have a very comprehensive understanding of the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution. In South Africa, for your sake, the Bill of Rights, which addresses the citizens' rights regarding unlawful search and seizure, because there is something that's called unlawful search and seizure. Now, it only says the right of the people to be secure in their person, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by oath or information, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. Now, I did not include it here, but I cannot remember. But in any case, the Bill of Rights more or less speaks the same about that. Now, the question is, when can the government intrude upon a person's privacy by effecting a search or seizure? The answer is right there. When the government has probable cause to believe that a person has committed a crime or possesses contraband. You know, and if you do not search and seize immediately, they're going to flush it down the toilet. Or instrumentalities of a crime, a fruit of a crime, and the agents comply with the warrant requirements of the Fourth Amendment or the Bill of Rights. So you'll have to have probable cause to believe all of that, and you'll have to be able to stand up in a court of law to justify that action. So now to analyze the situation, ask the following questions. Now, is a government agency involved in all of this? Of course it is. Was there a search or a seizure? And also, was there a warrant issued? The officer would probably know by then, because he would have maybe called in and asked, is there a warrant on this person's name? What should I touch? What should I not touch? When should I touch it? What is reasonable expectation of privacy? I mean, there's many examples you can use, and we've got a couple of examples we can use. For example, the boombox was stolen. of a certain person, and they reported it to the police early that morning, and the police, they had to approach a house. There was a lot of noise on the house, and they wanted to ask the family to just quiet a little bit down. And the officer sees the boombox. Now, is it allowed for the boombox to be inspected by the officer? Because the officer, remember, had no reason to intrude upon a person's privacy at that stage. No reason at all. So he needs to have a warrant to inspect that instrument. Of course, the courts recognize certain special circumstances where it may not be possible to obtain a warrant before conducting a seizure. You can ask the person, can I inspect this? And then the plaintiff would say, well, yeah, like an automobile, cell phone, a cellular phone, search incident to an arrest, or whatever the case may be. Some expectations and the limitations may include all of these that I just mentioned. Now, and also was, about the warrant requirement. Let me just do this real quick. I cannot. There we go. Was there an exception to the warrant requirements? Stop and frisk. I mean, was it possible for the person to be stopped, to be frisked? Emergency yard pursuit. In other words, this is a felony vehicle, and you're in pursuit of this vehicle, and all of a sudden they come to a stop. Was there time to get a warrant to search the vehicle? In Vincent's evidence, special emergencies. What happens if the constitutional constraints of the Fourth Amendment are violated? Then what will happen is the court case will be suppressed. In other words, the judge will just find that the person's rights was, violated, and they will suppress the motion of the officer. Oh, we're finished. My goodness, I didn't realize we were so quick. But anyway, guys, there's the curriculum. You can study this week's pages 82 to 97, and you can also monitor your term paper. Well, if you will, you can finish up your term paper by the end of, not this week or next, maybe on the end of that other week. You're most welcome to do so, and you'll still have to write 4 to 6 pages, please. So, where am I? Where are you? There you go. There you go. I see you. Moni is still awake. That's wonderful news. Well, I hope you understood that segment of the work. It was not so difficult. Remember what I said about domestic violence? It's always nice to know these kind of things, pro-arrest policies, and how to find yourself a good crime investigator, or a pro-arrest policies. I mean, you just have to take the lady to the courts. They will immediately issue a protection order against the perp to help her against being violated. Yeah, and you can always advise them to go to the courts because the state prosecutor will immediately issue a protection order, or the police station for that matter. All right then. Is there any questions?
Nothing from our side.
Yes, Pastor Mone, we did the last exam. Firstly, that exam didn't have a timer on it.
Oh yes, I realized that.
And then gave us results which were very poor results.
Oh, don't stress yourself about that. Well, I told Mani this morning, I will have to check on that. My week was a little bit congested last week with a lot of issues, and I will just check on that and remark that test for you all, so that you won't be stressed out again. Okay. Don't stress out. I see here. I'm on my PC here. I can see there were some challenges for you all, so don't worry about that. Probably
Okay,
all
sure.
passed.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm just glad to hear that I wasn't the only one that had problems.
No, I knew something happened when you reported it. So I just, I'm very calm about it, because you're a very clever class. I mean, come on, you're very clever. And I can see your writing also in your term papers that it speaks volumes about your professionality regarding your studies, and it's good. It's good. Well, I hope you have a good night, and I hope the power won't let you down.
Okay. Good night, Pastor Monet.
Have a good night, my
Thank
friend.
you.
God bless everybody.
Okay,
Shalom.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a lovely evening, everybody. Blessings for the week.
Thanks, man.